All right, here's our first presentation of the day.
All right, so I did mine on the satire of the trades. So the first question, where was it found? So it was composed in the Middle Kingdom. It has been found on many different papyri and writing boards, ostraca, so we have multiple different copies of this that we can compare and use. But the one that you see on your left is the papyrus Salier II, I think. And as you can see, some parts of it can't be read. So,
Button should be up in the middle.
okay.
Top. There.
Yeah, so you can see these little pieces right here that are like holes where they can't read exactly what everything is. But they use some of the red text as dividers in the text, which help give some context clues about where things belong.
Okay. And so this is good because when you actually can see the text, then you can sort of see the problems that a translator would have. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they're broken, sometimes fragmented in some way, sometimes obscured. And then also you could, if you just go back to that, often what they do is they count the lines. So you see you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's 10 lines appearing there. See? So that's another way they do it. They usually say line 6. And then so you would name the text. You would describe it. You would mention those places you can't see. They use the word lacuna. For those of you who've studied your Latin, you will maybe remember the word lacuna means a gap or opening or whatever. And so that means there's a gap in the text. And that's kind of interesting because in some of that sort of faded spot, there are some letters. You can see like the one letter in line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, center, go over to the right there, go down. Right there, that letter is in that white spot, see?
Mm-hmm. So this one appears to be missing 1 or 2 whole letters in that spot too.
Yeah, part of the red letters there. And so the red letters, they would also obviously designate that. They got some red dots on there, up and down.
Yeah.
So all of those things would be used to describe it. Because they sometimes show a picture of it like this, although now for us it's much easier to see pictures than it used to be. Mm-hmm. And so, sometimes then what they would do is make a transcription. So you'd have the actual picture of it. Sometimes there would then be a drawing of it, a hand-drawn to try to copy it. And then there would be a transcription, which is where you would go in and then transcribe the letters from the text into letters, in this case of Egyptian, and then a translation. So there's a lot of different words. Transcription, translation are 2 very different things. Okay, go ahead.
All right. Yeah, and then the other thing about the dots is they weren't exactly sure what they were, but they eventually came to decide that they had something to do with dividing the text into individual parts, possibly about the different traits. So this is Wolfgang Helck. He was a German Egyptologist.
He's got a restaurant, doesn't he? Wolfgang.
So he helped to translate, but as you could see with the missing pieces there, and since it wasn't written in hieroglyph, they ran into a couple of issues translating it, in that the words that they thought should be there weren't. And so there was a lot of nonsense and missense in some of the sentences. And they eventually came to decide that it was most likely due to like homophones almost in the Egyptian language. So the story was likely passed on by oral tradition for a while before it was written down. And then the scribe who wrote it down, when he couldn't remember how to write a word or he misheard the person, he just wrote down the word that sounded most similar to what they had said. So it made the story kind of confusing until the transliteration. So when he kind of moved it over to a modern language.
So what you're saying is this thing is often sort of like the way I talk. It sort of makes sense, but then it doesn't.
So there's some weird words thrown in there sometimes.
Some weird stuff thrown in there. It
Yep.
makes sense to me. Maybe not to you.
So then those red dots and the sections we were talking about were the 30 sections that they eventually decided to divide the text into. And those were determined by Helk as well. So what is the story about exactly? It is part of a text known as the Teaching of Duaf's son Keti. The father is basically trying to convince his son that having a scribe position in Egypt is like the best job you could possibly have. And so he's trying to convince the son that he should go to school to become a scribe because all the other jobs are just much harder, and the life of a scribe is great, and you're your own boss, and you're not tired at the end of the day.
Sounds good to me.
So, although...
Especially your own boss part.
Yeah, your own boss part's gotta be pretty good. But, it seems more like a really long, extended hyperbole rather than a satire, and there's been some question about whether it truly is a satire, even though it has small satirical elements. It's much more hyperbolic, talking about how horrible all the other jobs are.
Yeah.
So this is from the beginning of the text. I have a couple excerpts here. So again, the dad probably doesn't mean all the terrible things he says about all the other professions. While some of it may be true, some of it he's just exaggerating to try to convince the son that he should become a scribe. So our first quote: "I will make you love writing more than your mother. I will show its beauties to you. Now it is greater than any trade. There is not one like it in the land."
Okay. More than your mother.
So, I've seen the metal worker working at the mouth of his furnace. With fingers like the stuff of a crocodile, he stinks more than fish eggs. And so then, some of these, when they were written on ostraca and other documents other than just papyrus, were actually included with pictures to show, what was the working conditions of these people. So that's another important thing about this document coming up multiple times, is that we can compare the text, see the differences, and we can use it to kind of give us somewhat of an idea of what some of the jobs in Egypt were like.
So you're going to have scaly fingers and stink more than fish eggs.
Yep.
Don't want that one.
So then they have the carpenter. So the carpenter who uses in a days is more tired than the worker in the fields. His field is the wood, his hoe the adays. His work is endless. So it's kind of grainy, but you can see that they're using basically saw-like objects, and then I'll show a picture of an adays next. And they're just working on wood all day, carving and cutting.
It's ads.
Ads? Okay. Yeah. Wasn't sure. Alright. So then this is kind of what an ads would have been like. This is from a different time period, but you get the idea of what they would have looked like. They would have been kind of a stick with some kind of sharpened piece of stone on the end, and they would have used it to kind of either peel the wood or cut it or carve it.
Yeah, kind of like a chisel.
Mm-hmm. Much like a chisel or a whittle. Okay. So then we get to the jewelry. The jeweler drills with his chisel in different kinds of stone. Once he is done with the inlay of the eyes, his arms are weary, he is tired. Sitting down at sunset, his knees and back ache.
Yeah, you don't want that.
So then you can see them kind of working with beads and stone and kind of making jewelry there on the right. Then the barber. The barber is still shaving at the end of the day. To the town he takes himself. To his corner he takes himself. From street to street he takes himself to search for people to shave. He works with his arms to fill his belly like a bee which can only eat as it has worked. And so then I found some relatively time-appropriate barber tools. You've got shears, a comb, pick of types, and then other little tools that they used.
And the priest, had shaved heads, so I imagine they have to go see the barber quite often.
Mm-hmm. So, look, no trade is free from a director except the scribe. He is the director. but if you know writings, it will be better for you more than these trades I have shown you. So then this is a statue of a scribe that was found, and it had, I believe, portions of this text describing the role of a scribe in ancient Egypt as well.
Now you see the way he's seated. The scribe would wear a dress, a kilt. Most of them were Scottish. And they would then take their kilt, I guess we would call it that, and stretch it tight across between their knees, and that sort of became their tabletop, if you will, sort of their surface to do their work.
So after the trade descriptions, it does go on for a little bit while longer to talk about how this son should behave once he becomes a scribe. Tells him things like don't follow too closely, don't speak when you're not supposed to. It just gives him a general idea of what he should and shouldn't be doing as a scribe and while he's in school. And so that has kind of led some people to believe that maybe parts of the text were written after maybe the son was able to go on to become a scribe, and he convinced him to, so then the rest of it was telling him how he should behave.
Okay. Sure study. Very good. Yeah. That's a very famous text, by the way. And sometimes misquoted, that's part about writing. People who, the English majors would jump all over that one, that you should write. But we know what it really means. You're not composing the writing. You're just transcribing the writing. So don't let them fool you. Instructions of a man for his son.
Yeah. So this is the, what do you want to call the piece of literature that I found from the text that I thought was pretty interesting. This thing will actually move to the next slide.
It's not?
Otherwise, maybe it might just have to.
Not ordinary either.
No.
Really? Wait a minute, it went to the end.
Yeah, that's weird.
All right. Now try it. Well, you just use it to point. I'll forward it for you.
Well, we're going to go into section 1. The title and intro.
Okay.
Okay. Well, there's nothing really on the screen though.
All right. Hang on. Begin.
All right. So, as you can see, I picked my text on the instruction of a man for his son. And I found this was very interesting text. I mean, it took me a while to really understand what it was about, but once I kind of figured it out, I was able to find some interest into it. So, as you can see here, we have a man giving instruction to his son right here. I felt like this was a very accurate depiction of what the text was be talking about. And a quote that was found at the beginning that was very interesting to me is, "Listening to my voice, do not neglect my words. Do not be indifferent about what I shall say to you."
You know what? I like to think that kid's name is Jimmy.
Jimmy.
And his dad's name is something like
Hugh.
Hugh and Jimmy. Okay, good.
Okay. Yeah, I found this was a very accurate depiction of what the story would be talking about. So, and as you can see here for the next few sections, I've actually tried to connect this with Scripture. I know this was not a Christian text by any means because it was an Egyptian text, but I felt like there were so many statements throughout different sections that I could connect to
Wisdom
Scripture.
literature.
Yes, wisdom for all ages. It's not just found in the Bible.
Ancient wisdom literature for all ages.
Yes, for all ages. So, show good character without transgressing, for laziness shall not be a part of a wise man. So, basically, if you're a wise man, you will appreciate correction. And basically laziness is not a part of being a wise man. A wise man is also one that's hardworking. And that's what I basically got out of this one right here. So section 2. Do not turn away from God. Adore the king. Love him as inheritance. So, like I said, this is not a Christian text, but the text actually capitalized on the word God. So I thought that was interesting. As we can see in Scripture today, we are to not only not turn away from God, but adore the king, as well as love him as his adherents. So basically, we're supposed to respect the government. Like the Bible talks to us about respecting the government. This is also from a wise man back quite a few thousand years ago who said the same thing. We're supposed to respect our authorities and respect those that come before us, respect the king, respect the government. The king will determine who he will make fortunate and give his attention to by those who he loves. So basically, there's much reward for those that the king appreciates, basically. And that's basically what I got out of section 2 there. And student devos right there is basically something that I found interesting there. Everyone must submit to governing authorities, for all authority comes from God, and those in positions of authority have been placed there by God. So basically, if the authority was not placed there by God, it would not be there. So section 3, God, it's not luck, it's God's favor. The king has authority to punish, but great is the favor of God, and so is his might. So ultimately, it's not so much what the king thinks of you that matters, it's what God thinks of you, ultimately. And I'm pretty sure in this case, they thought more of the gods than what the king is. Even though the king was very high in authority, and they did respect what he thought of them, but ultimately it was God, or the gods, who they wanted the most respect from. Whatever fate has planned for someone, it shall not overtake them, because the gods are ultimately, in this case, would be what would be determining their fate.
I got a question.
Oh, sorry.
Was this written during Akhenaten's reign, or?
I wasn't really quite sure. It was like it didn't really give much description of when it was written from the introduction, but
I was just wondering whether maybe the text that reads something differently in the original language or something. The word God might mean plural or something. I was just wondering.
Yeah, I mean, the way it was translated over in the text, basically, it had capitalized. So I don't know if it was originally capitalized, but the way they translated it was capitalized. So that's why I thought it was interesting that this is not a Christian text, but it sounds very Christian because of the principles and everything you get from it. So that's basically all that I had for you guys. That's the references that I found there. So, thank you.
Thunderous applause. Thunderous.
All 4 people were. Yeah.
Well, you know,
Full applause from everyone.
the people who are listening don't know how many people are here. So what they can't see that I'll now describe is a room just filled with, I don't know, scores of people, depending on how you count a score.
So, my source was the cycle song in honor of Sen Worsrep. So, I'm gonna go with that. The third.
Yes, that's close. That's good.
That's cool. So it was basically 6 songs that were praising him, and at first I thought they were like, it was like a high schooler or just someone that just like needed to be appreciated all the time, like with every action he did.
Or a lot like me.
I mean, I guess. And they were first.
All right,
only 4 of the songs are well preserved and have been translated. They were first published by F.L.I. Griffith, and many worked to translate the songs. I believe it was like 20 people that worked on it, and historians believe that his statue looked different because he wanted to be, like, basically he wanted to be better than the past rulers. He wanted to be separated from them and, I guess, a lot more known.
Very large ears.
Yeah, I thought that was, like, weird, so when I looked it up, so I needed to know why, and it was basically because he wanted to be as different as possible from past rulers. The songs relate to religious literature and embody the ideas about the nature of the kingship in the Middle Kingdom. They were also examples of poetry. Now, as I stated, it was like he wanted to, when I first read it, it was like, oh, he just needs the praise of the people. But then I remembered over watching the video that the pharaohs were seen as like gods among humans. So these texts were more to like praise their king. And the first one I have highlighted is the horse godlike of transformations, the two ladies godlike of birds, the falcon of Gulf Kepler, the king of Upper and Lower Egypt, Kakor, the son of Semwerset, who takes possession of the two lands as one vindicated. Horus, godlike of transformation, who has protected the land and has extended its borders. Something that I found interesting was slaying the bowman without drawing a bow. So obviously it's like the people see him as this fierce warrior that people just basically fear without him even having to do anything. Basically, the people he goes out there and all he has to do is stand, and people know you don't want to mess with him. Song 1 continues, when shooting an arrow as Skepmet, which is the goddess of plague and warfare, does, you fell thousands whom you know not. So, again, he's just a fierce warrior, and with just him shooting one arrow, he takes out an entire 1,000 people. Letting men sleep until daybreak, because young troops were at their slumbers, and your heart was their protector. Your commands have made your borders, and your word united the two riverbanks. So basically, he could let his army sleep all day, and he would be out there fighting them, all by himself. Or at least that's what I got out of the translation. And when I wanted to know about the united riverbanks, so he ended up expanding more down south of what they would consider Upper Egypt, and actually expanded the kingdom a little bit. Song 2, how jubilant are your gods, for you have made firm their offerings. How jubilant are your citizens, for you have fixed their boundaries. Down to line 4, how jubilant are the Egyptians because of your might, for you have protected their traditions. 9, how jubilant are the two lands because of your vigor, for you have protected them, their ramparts. So it felt like a repetition from Song 1, but the people sort of just, they loved it. And they were just praising him for the things they found great within him. How great is the Lord for his city? He is Re, and other rulers of men are insignificant. How great is the Lord for his city? Yeah, he is a dam which holds back river against its flood waters. How great is the Lord for his city? Yeah, he is resting place. He is a resting place which he protects the fearful man from his enemy. So once again, it's just these people. At one point, I thought, how much did he do for them? That is like their confidence with it. Like that line right there was like, dang, you must have had your faith complete within him, because if he could protect you and you find rest within just being in his presence, it's like, all right, he must be someone great. Song 3 continues. How great is the Lord for his city? Yeah, he is a mountain which wards off the storm wind at the same time of tempest. How great is the Lord for his city? Yeah, he is Skepmet, again, a goddess of plague and warfare, against the enemies who tread upon his border. Song 4, he has come to us, he has tied together the two lands in that he had joined the sedge to the beat. He has come to us, he has ruled the Egyptians, in that he has placed the desert in his control. He has come to us, he has nourished the Egyptians, in that he has dispelled their poverty. He has come to us, he has trampled upon the foreign lands, in that he has beaten off the cave dwellers who know not the fear of him. He has come to us, he has fought upon his border, and that he has rescued one robbed of his possessions. Song 5 and Song 6, since those two weren't well preserved, they obviously couldn't be translated. And I wanted to read a little bit about him, and he reigned from 1836 through 1818 BC, so 18 years, and he reshaped the government and expanded the land. He extended the southern frontier of Egypt, and along the Nile, he actually set up certain forts. So when if someone was to attack, one fort would set off a signal alerting the next city over. So would I say he's the greatest, pharaoh of all time? No, because there's I feel like that. Well, for one, I like how she put, just because she was a woman and she reigned for such a long time within an era like that, and the praise of the people made it seem like he was sort of like just Alexander the Great or Julius Caesar. But I guess for Egyptians, he reigned for 18 years, and they were prospering. So I guess I could understand why they praised him so much. And that is that is it.
That's it?
Yep.
All right. Good job. Well, I'm hoping that looking at the literature gives you a window into the culture and the people in a way that reading a textbook does not. But notice how how the texts are numbered. This is the other thing. It's interesting too. When you start to work with original texts, right, in a ancient language, you have damages like we saw before of various kinds, and then it'll have a certain shape to it. So numbering the lines, sometimes even counting the words, that sort of thing. All these are things that are done in a preliminary fashion, and then the transcription of it, and then the translation of it. Then you have to interpret it. What does it mean? So we're seeing some different categories or different big groups, right? We have sort of wisdom literature, instructional kind of things, right? We have these kind of hymns or praise, We have others that are more narrative. They're telling a story. We had one of those earlier, too, from our departed member here. I don't know. He hadn't been back for a while. But very famous story there as well.